This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. To the new viewers, welcome. To the repeat viewers, your free trial is up, so I'm gonna need some subscriptions. Tonight, counterfeit masks might look like the real thing, but they don't provide the protection you need. We look at the fakes flooding the market. Plus, the push for available vaccines continues for a community hit especially hard by COVID-19. But first, here's what you need to know right now. The winter storm is still wreaking havoc on the US. More than 5 million people nationwide have been in freezing temperatures and in the dark without power Tuesday, most of them in Texas. The freezing temperatures, paired with high amounts of snow, shut down much of the state and strained power grids.
Things will likely get worse before they get better. There's a high chance the power will be out for these folks until the weather gets better, which will not be for a couple of days.
The outages forced Houston's Harris County to scramble and administer thousands of doses of Moderna's vaccine after the backup generator failed and left doses without proper frozen storage. Vaccines quickly went to nearby Rice University, as well as a hospital and county jail to make sure they were used. It's been a similar scene across the country with vaccination sites forced to cancel appointments and delay delivery of doses.
This weather is going to slow down our vaccination some. There's simply going to be too much snow.
This winter storm is also impacting parts of the country a bit more used to the snow and ice. Chicago saw 1.5 feet of snow early Tuesday, forcing the school district to cancel in-person classes. At least 20 people have died across the country as a result of the storm since the frigid weather moved in late last week. Congress is not done looking into the attempt at insurrection on January 6th that resulted in 5 deaths and dozens of injuries. Over the weekend, former President Donald Trump was acquitted in his impeachment trial on the charge of inciting the riot. But today, the Democratic chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee filed a civil lawsuit accusing Trump of inciting the deadly attack. The case also named Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and extremist organizations that had members charged by the Justice Department. Additional suits could still be brought by other members of Congress or law enforcement officers injured while responding to the riots. On Monday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also announced an independent inquiry into the attacks. She said she plans to establish a commission to investigate and report on the causes of the Capitol attack, which she called a domestic terrorist attack. The inquiry calls to mind both the 9/11 Commission in Congress as well as Republicans' recent 2-year inquiry into the Benghazi consulate attack that killed 4 Americans. Moderna expects to deliver 300 million vaccine doses across the US by July. Here's the updated timeline released today. The first 100 million doses will be delivered by the end of March. The US has already gotten just under half of those. Another 100 million doses by the end of May, and another 100 million doses at the end of July. That third batch wasn't previously expected until September, so it's welcome news for the vaccine rollout. By the end of February, the FDA is expected to green-light the Johnson & Johnson vaccine for emergency use authorization, which would mean another 100 million doses of that vaccine. Unlike Pfizer's and Moderna's shots, it only requires 1 dose. The timeline for when vaccines will be widely available to the public beyond just the elderly and high risk is still murky, but Dr. Fauci tried his best to clear up the confusion.
So when you hear about how long it's going to take to get the overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated, I don't think anybody disagrees that that's going to be well to the end of the summer and we get in the early fall. When are we be able to start on that process? It's probably going to be in the springtime.
Anywhere there's a demand for a product, you can find fakes that pass for the real thing. Now, it's one thing when we're talking about handbags or designer shoes, but when we're talking about counterfeit face masks, that can really hurt people. Newsy's Patrick Terpstra looks at this trend of fake N95 masks, giving buyers a false sense of security.
They have fooled everybody.
Counterfeit N95 respirator masks can look so real. It's one reason we found fakes keep turning up in shipments destined for medical workers coast to coast, falsely claiming to be from 3M or other legitimate manufacturers with no indication of how effective they are compared to the real thing.
They look, they feel, they fit, and they breathe like a 3M mask.
1.7 million bogus N95s intercepted in New York, another 2 million sent to Washington state. Medical staff and hospitals there relied on some of the masks before realizing they were knockoffs. No evidence that led to any COVID infections.
It is incredibly disheartening, really, really frustrating.
Demand in healthcare remains sky high for the N95, able to screen out 95% of airborne particles as frontline workers treat new mutations of coronavirus.
You have all these healthcare institutions with this immense demand that's chasing this very limited supply.
Homeland Security Special Agent Brian Winehouse says fraudsters are all too willing to fill that gap, duping distributors into selling masks not made by 3M or any other reputable brand.
Individuals and organizations that were already involved in intellectual property crimes sort of changed what they were doing to fit this new need.
Customs and Border Patrol seized a total of more than 12 million counterfeit masks last year. But arrests are rare despite international efforts to thwart PPE fraud. Fake masks are coming mostly from China and other countries, Winehouse says.
They're mislabeling the address that it's being shipped from or the company that's being shipped from. So it takes a lot of work to actually run down the individuals.
We also found while 3M has an online portal for quickly authenticating masks, it's not available for all models. 3M says buyers can reach out to the company for help validating any mask. PPE distributor Shazul Amin says before COVID, we just did not have to worry about counterfeit PPE.
Now, if you're going to go back and say, hey, we need to figure out how to make sure every single mask can be authenticated, it's hard to go back and put those processes in reactively.
3M tells us it has quadrupled production of its N95s while working with Homeland Security to get forgeries off the market. The company has filed dozens of lawsuits to fight fraudulent sales and says purchasers should ensure they're going to an authorized 3M dealer.
I think they're doing as much as they can, right? But I don't think anyone is prepared for something like this.
With new variants of COVID emerging, you might be shopping for an N95. And it's important to know that there are a few things to look for.
A legitimate N95 should display the word NIOSH, the CDC stamp of endorsement, an approval code beginning with the letters TC, a model number, a filter class, and efficiency level marking beginning with N, P, or R. Fakes may be missing any of those details, might misspell the NIOSH stamp, or have ear loops instead of headbands. Asking questions of a supplier may be the best way to feel confident what you are buying offers the best protection.
When you can't speak to the end sellers, that's when my red flag goes up.
Patrick Terpstra, Newsy, Washington.
The parade's been nixed, but very few things can actually stop Mardi Gras from happening. Laissez le bon temps rouler, but do it from a distance. Here's what's trending. Mardi Gras is hitting a little different this year for obvious reasons. You probably won't see crowds of beaded folk in high traffic areas like the French Quarter or Bourbon Street, and the parade's been canceled. But this isn't the first time the powers that be have had to limit carnival festivities. Parades have been canceled before because of war, unrest, that other pretty major pandemic in 1918, and a police union strike, to name a few crises. But New Orleans ain't nothing if not resilient. Hurricane Katrina didn't stop the festivities when they rolled around a year later. The mayor's office has been pretty clear that Mardi Gras isn't canceled this year. In fact, floats are still happening, they're just stationary this go round. Hell, if you give me one of those cups that looks like a grenade with all the usual stuff inside of it, we can make Mardi Gras happen right here, right now. The Green New Deal is trending not because there's been significant movement on the Democratic-led legislative proposal to tackle climate change, but because it's become a hot topic in online discussions of what's causing power outages in places like Texas. Let's break some of this down. U.S. Representative Lauren Boebert, a Republican from Colorado, called out the Green New Deal on Twitter, saying it was just proven unsustainable and connecting it to the rolling blackouts and power outages. There's also been some talk of how the frozen wind turbines in the Lone Star State are contributing to power outages. That somehow also leads back to the Green New Deal. To be clear, the Green New Deal hasn't been implemented. A resolution actually failed in the Senate in 2019. And as for the frozen wind turbines, they account for about 23% of energy on the power grid in Texas. A senior director for the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which operates the state's power grid, blamed the outages mostly on frozen instruments related to coal, nuclear, and natural gas facilities, the state's largest energy provider. The Nintendo Direct broadcast is coming back after a 5-month hiatus. Nintendo said Tuesday they'll have a proper 50-minute live stream focused on available games and new games coming to the Nintendo Switch this year, which whipped fans into a frenzy. The surprise announcement also coincides with the 35th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda, which could mean big news for the franchise. Nintendo Direct has been around for the last decade, and it's been a platform for the company to keep their fans abreast of what's coming down that neon green pipe of theirs. Also, it's no surprise they'll be focusing on games for Switch, seeing that it's the most popular gaming console in the US. If you want in on the action, you can tune into Nintendo Direct on February 17th at 5 p.m. Eastern. Just don't be late for my show, okay? Latinos make up one of the most high-risk groups for serious illness or death from COVID-19, yet they struggle with access to vaccines. The health problems faced by many in Latino communities are exacerbated by vaccine hesitancy, language barriers, and getting their hands on life-saving vaccines. Newsy's Kat Sandoval takes a closer look at how health professionals are addressing this issue.
Across the country, Latinos face many barriers to getting the coronavirus vaccine. Language, lack of education, access to appointments, and fear of deportation.
There's a natural aversion to putting your name on any list, putting your address and your phone number on any list, because you're afraid of how it's going to be used, the information.
1, 2, 3. Latinos or Hispanics make up about 18% of the U.S. population, and they are disproportionately getting sick from COVID. Their death rates are more than twice that of whites.
My personal opinion is that this is not a fear of Latinos of getting the vaccine. I think it's lack of opportunities to get it.
But this is not just a Latino problem. It's a problem for all of us if we need to put a stop to this virus.
I just got vaccinated. Thank God. I feel good.
It was a lucky day for this San Diego resident, but it wasn't easy. After failing multiple times to book an online appointment, he enlisted his niece's help. And for those who only read in Spanish, it's even more difficult to navigate through English-only vaccine portals. In Arizona, Sandra Valenzuela stepped in to help her 81-year-old mother-in-law.
It's horrible. It's a horrible situation for us, that we speak Spanish, that our first language is in Spanish, but what can we do?
A recent AP NORC poll showed about half of Hispanics surveyed were extremely or very worried about themselves or family members being infected with COVID-19. They're also slightly hesitant than whites to get the shot. About 65% were willing to get vaccinated or have already received the first dose. But even if Latinos are willing to get the shot, for those essential workers working, it's about making time to get it.
Bodega workers, supermarkets, restaurants, food industry, and they are working during the day. These are done during the day. So it's hard to get them to find time to get vaccinated.
For Newsy, I'm Kat Sandoval.
We're going to hit you with a few ads, but we'll see you back here on the other side. Now, about a year into this pandemic, scientists are still figuring out the origins of COVID-19. But what we do know is that the virus likely passed from animals and into humans. We also know one big factor in that animal-to-human contagion: deforestation. For Newsy's virology series, Ellen Rolfus looked at how humans reshaping nature could fuel future pandemics.
All over the world, trees are disappearing on a massive scale. And it's a phenomenon that's linked to many outbreaks of infectious disease. In Brazil, for example, the burning of rainforest directly impacted the spread of malaria. Clearing land for agriculture in Indonesia triggered the first outbreaks of Nipah virus in humans. And in West Africa, road construction and logging were factors in the reemergence of Ebola. As humans radically reshape landscapes across the world, viruses previously confined to wildlife have more opportunity to spill over into humans, which experts say was the likely starting point of coronavirus. About 60% of all diseases that infect humans originate in animals. In the case of COVID-19, scientists theorized that it originated in a bat and jumped to another species before reaching humans. And while disease spillover is rare, the likelihood of transmission seems to increase when viruses spread first to domestic animals, like poultry, cows, or pigs. And changes to the environment by humans can amplify the spillover effect.
We did an analysis of all the instances of new emerging diseases over the last 80 years and looked at the exact reasons and circumstances as to how those diseases emerged.
Jonathan Epstein is a veterinarian and disease ecologist at EcoHealth Alliance, who studies emerging zoonotic viruses.
One of the most significant drivers responsible for about 30% of all the emerging disease events is land use change. That could be deforestation, it could be agricultural expansion, but it could also be reforestation.
These kinds of shifts in land use are seen all over the world. In disrupting intact ecosystems, they reduce the natural barriers between virus host animals and humans. When EcoHealth Alliance mapped out where zoonotic outbreaks are most likely to occur, the global hotspots, highlighted in yellow, aligned with areas where large numbers of humans and livestock are living near pristine environments that are experiencing rapid development.
Well, when we look at the areas on the planet that tend to be the most vulnerable to emerging viruses, and specifically zoonotic viruses, it does have a lot to do with biodiversity. But it's not the presence of biodiversity that's the risk. It's the change to that environment, the incursion of people and domestic animals that really creates the risk of these viruses getting out of their native hosts and into people.
And nobody can predict exactly when or where the next outbreak will occur, or even what virus will be responsible. But identifying places most at risk is one step that can help researchers earlier detect zoonotic diseases in wildlife and livestock before they have a chance to spread widely among humans, controlling the severity of an outbreak and stopping the next pandemic before it starts.
If you haven't done so already, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. For real, let us know what you think of the show. I'm great at accepting critical feedback. Most of the time. Mental illness affects people from all walks of life, but Black Americans especially have reported higher rates of psychological distress because of things like systemic racism. But stigmas around mental health keep many Black Americans from seeking treatment. National reporter Dan Grossman takes a closer look at that dynamic and what's being done to change that.
In the world of mental health,
and we partner with kids in need of dentistry, and this is their space.
Perception can be everything.
We didn't want it to feel institutional. We didn't want it to feel like a clinic. We wanted people to come in, feel welcome.
For Dawn Davenport, her work at the Mental Health Center of Denver revolves around that creed.
As a community mental health center, we knew that we could do the mental health piece of it. And it was a matter of finding out what else was needed in this community to make this more of a comprehensive center. So this is one of our play therapy spaces.
From the wallpaper to the lighting to the activities that are offered here, it all centers around destigmatizing a word that has held too much power in our community for far too long.
You know, being a person of color and admitting that you need something is it's very difficult.
Leisha Groves is the Associate Director of Operations here and knows that firsthand as her father took his own life when she was young.
People are suffering and it's a hidden illness.
Research from Columbia University shows that adults in the Black community are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems, and young Black adults experience higher rates of mental health problems while using mental health services less than their white counterparts.
You've got to be 2 or 3 steps better than, so that means you can't be vulnerable. You can't show any what would be considered in the community weakness.
Dan Gillison is the CEO of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and says that perception of vulnerability traces back to slavery and the inequities Black men and women still face every day. There are also socioeconomic factors that affect access to health care and exposure to contributing mental health factors such as homelessness and crime.
You're starting to see more people say that I live with, I exist with, I accomplished with this, and it's starting to resonate in communities of color.
This space has helped people accomplish something similar as it works to change the perception of mental illness.
People will stop me afterwards and be like, so, and we're having tea. We're not even talking about mental health, anything. And they're like, what if I wanted to talk to someone? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And so there's just something about normalizing this space of what a mental health clinic looks like.
I'm Dan Grossman reporting.
Vincent van Gogh once said, "Art is to console those who are broken by life." Well, Vinny, thanks to the pandemic, we're all a little broke right now, and many of us could use an escape. That's where an immersive Van Gogh exhibit comes in. It's a way to experience the Dutch painter's artwork in a pandemic-friendly environment. National reporter Usher Qureshi has more.
Step inside and escape into color, movement, and music. This is Immersive Van Gogh.
The first thing that hits you when you walk into the room and you see that this is just the size of the scale and how you can observe Van Gogh's technique.
Designed by digital artist Massimiliano Siccardi, over 400 images project onto 500,000 cubic feet inside this historic neoclassical building.
The transformation of the architecture by the art in and of itself is also completely fascinating.
Masks are required during the 45-minute walkthrough exhibit. Projected circles on the flooring guide social distancing. Surfaces are cleaned continuously.
Van Gogh was a guy who had a really tough time in life. He was depressed. He was isolated. He was frustrated at not getting to get done what he wanted to get done. And I think that's all stuff that we can relate to now.
It's been described as a sort of stream of consciousness narrative, taking the visitor inside the mind of Van Gogh and what may have flashed before his eyes in the moments before he passed.
It becomes this extraordinary adventure in color and brushstroke and image and concepts that covers really all of Van Gogh's life.
Starry Night, one of my favorites.
Fans of the Netflix series Emily in Paris may be familiar with the exhibit. It recently wrapped up a successful year-and-a-half run in France. 200,000 people have safely come through the Toronto display since last July. And last week, Immersive Van Gogh made its U.S. premiere here in Chicago.
There's over 15 miles of fiber optic cabling that we're putting into the building.
Technology drives the choreography. 24 computers control the 74 projectors.
155 million pixels is what's being displayed. It's immense.
The real goal, say the exhibit's production manager, is making it seamless.
I don't even want you to realize where the light's coming from. I want you to stand there in amazement and turn around and see another image that you haven't seen yet.
A chance to lose oneself in Van Gogh's art.
The art transcends and continues and is interesting to today, and it's a message of hope that I think everybody needs right now.
Reporting from Chicago, I'm Usher Qureshi.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow for more In the Loop. Same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.